The Democrats don't care if they lose, and they certainly don't care if an edge case candidate like Cornel West.
Wait, the Democrats don't care if they lose? Like Democrats don't care if they lose the election? Of course they care if they lose the election. Then they're not in power. What do you mean? What is that? What is that coming from Vaush mean? Vaush and the Vanguard, which is a communist, I believe, podcast. I believe they are communists. I've been on their show before. They had on Vaush to discuss and debate whether it's worth it to support third-party candidates and Cornel West for president in 2024. I am of the belief that third parties as of right now are basically worthless outside of maybe just shouting about important issues and bringing attention to those issues. I believe all the third parties currently are basically jokes and they can't challenge the current paradigm. The Libertarian Party is actively dripping members. They're losing members. They're losing fundraising capability. The Mises Caucus is taking it in a crazy direction that does not make me think that they're going to be a powerful political force anytime coming. Right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the system is built to discourage third parties. That's just how it is. From our debates to how the primary to the general election process, who gets on the ballot, who doesn't, it's all to benefit the two-party system. And so if all the third parties that are challenging that system right now are garbage, I'm not going to put my vote with them when we're facing a very important election. Definitely if there's a million road bumps that they can't explain how they're going to get around. Not to mention, I have problems with Cornel West and how he's very, very willing to give up Ukrainian territory, seemingly without the input of the Ukrainian people. And there's a bunch of other problems I would probably have with Cornel West, even if many of the economic issues we'd probably find alignment on. But let's listen to it. I think I've done enough background. You get the idea of the debate. Third-party debates are nothing new, but they wanted to have Vaush on to debate it. So let's listen. Let's see how this goes.
A candidate like Cornel West, who, you know, what's up, Vaush? How are you?
Yo.
Oh, there we go. You're good.
I reset which mic I use. Yeah. Hello. Howdy. How you doing?
Doing good.
Well.
Doing good. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, Zach. Doing great, man. Really excited to have this chat. Definitely, you know, this is a conversation that I think needs to be had about the Green Party, about third party movements in general, and specifically about the candidate in question, Dr. Cornel West, who I know we have some disagreements on, Vaush. So welcome back to the Vanguard. Thank you so much for taking the time to come hash this out with us. What have you been up to, man?
Having a bad sleep schedule mostly. I got a new kitten recently. What else? I'm trying to make a video game. That's been pretty fun. Just a wide range.
Making a video game?
Today, Bohemian interest.
He's making wait, Vaush is making a video game? What video game is Vaush making? It's not going to be like a political video game, is it? Like, I'm fine with like some politics in my video games, but like only with like good developers who know what they're doing, you know? Like the Life of Times of, I think, William Brandt. It has political themes, but it's a fantastic story-driven experience, right? Hearts of Iron, I guess it's obviously it has politics in it, but the game mechanics are fantastic, and a lot of the mods with role-playing mechanics are fantastic. And so a lot of times when I see political zealots, and I don't want to call Vaush political zealots, but when I see people politically interested getting into gaming, like they just make like preachy experiences that are just meant to kind of like signal to people who already agree with them, when the focus I think should be on making a good game. I'm not saying Vaush is going to do that. Anytime I hear somebody's like, I'm political, I'm going to make a game, it's like I expect them to just basically like make like a Frogger video game, just retexture Frogger and make like the Cars feminists and like the Frog Jordan B. Peterson or something. Like that's not, you didn't make a video game, right? He made like just like a joke. That's not a video game, that's a joke. So what is it? It's not a political game. Okay. It looks interesting. Does anybody have a link? Have you played the Luna Oi game? The Luna Oi game is a great example of this. The Luna Oi game is a perfect example of this. Suzerain, if you want a good political game, please check out Suzerain on Steam. I have it, actually. I just haven't played it yet. I think I have it downloaded on my computer. I just have yet to play it. I have yet to play it through. Maybe I should play it through on stream. Vaush's anyway, if anybody has any information on Vaush's video game, message me about it. I'd be interested to take a look.
interests. Being Joe Biden's strongest soldier, obviously, that's a day job. No, fun stuff like that. And I am happy to talk with you both. Whatever our disagreements, I find something interesting about the both of you, which distinguishes you from who I would consider to be your contemporaries, is that you're both actually human beings, which is not how I feel about a lot of other people.
I would agree from my conversations with them that they're not like, I don't think they completely, like from my talk with them when we talked about Ukraine, I never got the read on them that just kind of like disregarded like Ukrainian sovereignty or like I did feel like a human aspect. I believe these are two human breathing individuals from my conversation with them.
I have this disagreement on.
Yeah, well, we try and be, look, I mean, I mean, everybody considers themselves to be a reasonable person. I guess it's not much of an entry point to be like, well, I consider myself to be a pretty reasonable human, a pretty personable guy. But I mean, I guess I could just see multiple angles on the third party strategy thing. And that's why I wanted to, kind of broach this with you, Vaush. Back in 2020, I think I was sympathetic to a lot of the arguments that you're about to present to our audience, given the, tremendous threat of, Donald Trump returning to office, obviously in the wake of COVID-19, that was all, on the forefront of everybody's minds. He had basically not handled one of the most, destructive viruses of all, our entire lifetime, going back over 100 years. He was, careless in every fucking international conflict that we got into. We could go into the litany of problems of Donald Trump. And as a result of that, I was like, look, guys, like, I don't have any very kind words to say about Joe Biden, but I'm going to go ahead and pull the lever for the guy, given the fact that I think that he might do a couple of key issues that there's do things I agree with on, certain key issues, that Donald Trump was just absolutely unwilling to kind of consider, to unwilling to go down the road of. Like, obviously, one of the chief things that I was interested in with Joe Biden, grasping at threads. He's not a perfect candidate, obviously, but I thought that he would do a better job at things like getting back into the Iran deal. Donald Trump practically nuked.
Oh, dude, the Iran deal is. He appointed a special counsel on the Iran deal that I thought was a great pick. He picked somebody who helped design the Iran deal to be the special envoy to Iran. And I thought that was perfect. I thought that was a really good signal that they could re-enter the Iran deal. But things haven't really progressed past that point. And things haven't really picked up. The Iranians wanted us basically to remove all the sanctions before any conversation about enforcement could really be had. And now that and that's the one factor, there's a bunch of factors. But now that something that's really going to be a big sticking point is Iran is providing Russia with weapons to attack Ukraine. How are you going to create an environment, that political environment, to remove sanctions on Iran when they're actively supplying the annihilation of the Ukrainian national identity with terror weapons? They're supplying the Russians with Shahed drones, which, I mean, those things have blown up like over my house before. Like, not my house, but the house I stay at in Ukraine. Those things have been used to terrorize civilians and wear down their air defenses. So it's only become more politically divisive as time goes on, and it's going to be very difficult for the Biden administration to maneuver. But I still think there's a value in the Iran deal. But it's hard to imagine that there would not be a conversation about those drones in any deal negotiated with the Iranians.
Our relationship with Iran. Obviously, there was the extrajudicial assassination of Qasem Soleimani. There was the appointment of John Bolton, who has wanted nothing throughout his entire career than conflict with Iran, etc. So I thought that Joe Biden would be able to come in and shore that up, potentially rejoin the Iran nuclear deal, which was a accomplishment of the Obama and Biden administration that I actually thought was good. He abandoned that. He abandoned the $15 minimum wage, was unwilling to literally do the most pen stroke work of firing a Senate parliamentarian to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
That wouldn't have raised this. I don't know what this rewriting of history is. Him firing the Senate parliamentarian would have been one step forward in raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So what I mean by that is, the problem was that they tried to get a $15 minimum wage increase into budget reconciliation, and you don't need a supermajority during budget reconciliation. Budget reconciliation, you only need a simple majority. So potentially 50 votes and Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker. So that's what they attempted to do, because Joe Biden wanted to fulfill his campaign promise on a $15 minimum wage. Then once they did that, the Senate parliamentarian said, "No, you can't get. This is budget reconciliation. This legislation is way too broad for this. This would have to be voted on separately. You can't include this as part of it." And so what many people said is, okay, fire the budget parliamentarian. Okay, maybe, even though $15 minimum wage is not like a gigantic issue for me in the way that I think the issue should be handled much more decentralized. I think that we should have minimum wages that are tied to the cost of living in every locality. The minimum wage in Florida, minimum wage in West Virginia, and minimum wage in LA, California is very different. In fact, it can be different by the area of what state you live. So maybe it even shouldn't be by state. I think maybe it should be by county. Putting all that aside, I still think raising the minimum wage, if we're going to be doing this kind of top-down approach, is better than having nothing at all. So I see the motivation behind it. But he would have needed to get Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to agree to the $15 minimum wage increase after firing the Senate parliamentarian, which both of them made pretty clear they weren't going to do that. Joe Manchin being the clearest example of that. And so the question is no longer about, oh, this is just a stroke of the pen. Because the stroke of the pen assumes that every single Democrat in the coalition agrees with a $15 minimum wage increase. And Joe Manchin is the blue dog of all blue dogs. He's not your run-of-the-mill Democrat. So usually what they follow up this with saying, okay, pressure Joe Manchin. Pressure him with what? A primary challenge? Who else is going to win in that seat? Who? Who's going to win in that seat? Richard Ojeda? Who was the woman who challenged him in the Democratic primary? I forget her name, but she fails every time. And we're not even talking about people who got to the general. I mean, at least Richard Ojeda performed better in a congressional election, but he still lost in a congressional election. So who would replace him? So there's a bunch more to the question than what he's leading with here in saying, oh, you just stroke of the pen, fire the Senate parliamentarian. Here's a snippet of Vaush talking about his game. Oh, let's see.
You made that asset or you nicked it from somewhere? Oh, I nicked the ghost sprite. I wrote the code, though. And it's getting pretty hefty, at least by my standard. I actually did a lot today. You want to see? Look, it's not much, and, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Will there be a gay romance option? If there isn't a gay romance option, Vaush is a fascist piece of shit. I just want everyone to know that in advance.
Give it a moment. Here. I'll select both of the ghosts so you can see their respective colliders. And look. See? Shoves out of the way like that. Slides naturally against the one it's shoving against. It's a little stuttery because I need to add an additional step of movement for a frame after the collision, which will take a bit of work, but it's a conceptually simple problem. I'm also happy with this, see? If I right-click, it selects the unit, and it just moves right to it without actually pushing it.
Wow, yeah, he's actually making a video game. Anyway, back to the debate.
He opened up offshore drilling in natural areas more than even Donald Trump had. He didn't end Title 42 until, gosh, what, 6-7 weeks ago? It feels like, that was longer than Donald Trump had the brutal immigration policy enforced, even though it was at the height of the pandemic at that time. These list of things lead me to.
Did you guys read that recent report? I forget exactly who published it, but there's a report about an undocumented migrant getting caught in barbed wire and having a miscarriage because of it. There's so much on the border. I don't want to say the border is like a blind spot for Democrats, because I think people try to like paint it as if Democrats want to actually just have a completely open border, which is absolutely ridiculous. There's no border abolitionists, I even think, elected in all of Congress. But I do think that sometimes it's not an issue that gets the amount of attention it deserves. And when it does get that attention, it's basically just signaling to the Republican base. When we should be having a conversation about electing a ton more immigration judges, we're investing a lot more into the speeding up the process, so nobody even feels required to make these gigantic leaps across barbed wire forests where they could die of thirst to get caught up in barbed wire. or get mauled by wild animals and smuggled by coyotes. And that's not to say that we need to let literally everyone in. I'm just saying that if you make the process take 25 years, people are going to find workarounds. People do it all the time. If you ban a movie from being shown, if I took a movie and I threw it in the Disney vault and I said, nobody can watch it, not legally, people are going to try to pirate it. It's just going to happen.
To feel like the minutia between Joe Biden and, again, we said it on a clip that I think you reacted to. I'm not here to make the case that, Joe Biden is as bad or worse than Donald Trump. I do not believe that. I believe that he is clearly the lesser evil candidate. But I also don't believe that with the timeline that we have, continuously supporting the lesser evil candidate is going to yield the results that I think all three of us would like. I may be giving birth to grandchildren that get to see a post-climate society in the year 2080. You know what I mean? Maybe not having to pay $6,000 a month for rent if you live in an urban epicenter, right? Because at the rate that things are going, so much displacement is going to occur both internationally as a result of the aforementioned climate change, but also domestically as the cost of living goes up in a way that Joe Biden is absolutely unwilling to intervene on.
Hey Dylan, have you seen the civilian killings by Indonesia in West Papua? I think I mispronounced that slightly recently. No, that's a huge blind spot for me, but every time I hear anything about what Indonesia does in that region, it's always Japanese style Nanking, like babies on bayonets, like horrific nonsense. And it is stuff that was supported by the West for like decades upon decades. I don't know if you guys ever watched I think it's called The Art of Killing, or what's it called? It's a fantastic documentary about the anti-communist violence that went on, where they would just like murder just anyone for the slightest association with communist, socialist, like labor organizing, and they were proud of it. They saw it as like a patriotic achievement. Yeah, it's called a documentary called The Act of Killing. Oh my God, a fantastic documentary. Did we ever watch it on stream? I don't know if we ever watched it fully on stream. I don't think there's any blood in it because they have them recreate the killings that they did. But it is a fantastic documentary. And if you haven't seen it, I would heavily recommend it.
Just to, kind of start the discourse, that's kind of where I'm coming at all of this on, Vaush. Like, how would you try and present to me that I should still vote for Joe Biden anyway in the face of all of those lack of accomplishments and not a candidate like Cornel West, who, I think is much more on the same page as me politically?
Well, leaving aside any criticisms I have for Cornel West, of which there are at least a few, the broader argument to me is just that it's not really a choice we have in the matter. Ultimately, any positive outcomes we're going to get for this country and its political future will be dictated by the interests of the working class. And at the moment, we have to meet the working class where they are. The vast majority of people in this country consider political engagement in this country to be limited to a discussion between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, or the Democrats and the Republicans. I don't think that we can skip a step and jump right on over to Cornel West, especially when the system is electorally rigged against third parties. And our best bet is to continue to use the potential viability of the Democrats to hold back the tide of fascist power taking. And in so doing, hopefully we can, as an additional step, try to warm them up to better ideas. I think Bernie Sanders did a great job of this, simultaneously bolstering the Democratic Party while also introducing people to more radical ideas within it. But we don't really have the luxury of handing anything over to Trump or the GOP. They're openly anti-democracy. Trump just said he'd suspend the Constitution. Every candidate but Trump is worse than Trump. DeSantis is worse than Trump. Vivek is worse than Trump. He's the best case scenario in the GOP, and he's also not acceptable. It's not a luxury we have to say, well, we can leave this up on a shot. We can leave it to a lark while we play around with our better options. I think we have to work on what reaches the most people most effectively, which is why I'd be more positively inclined to Cornel West if he'd ran as a Democrat. I know the Dems are not keen on a primary this time around, but I think he could have reached a lot more people than if gone the road that he did.
I do think it would have been more effective, the primary in the Democratic Party. I mean, look at Marianne Williamson, as far as I know, is polling better than Cornel West. RFK, polling better than Cornel West. I think the idea of directly challenging Joe Biden within the compounds of the Democratic Party probably would have gotten more attention to Cornel West. But nah, third party. And the thing is, Cornel West really butchered his third party run too. He started with the People's Party, which is a joke third party that doesn't even have ballot access in many of the states that he would be trying to run for president in. So I don't know how you're going to do that with a coalition more interested in hosting rallies to try to stop aid to Ukraine that garner them nothing, just waste organizing potential and money, and doesn't even have ballot access. It's a PR stunt. It's a podcaster movement of contrarians on the internet. And so, after realizing that, after a week or two, they dropped it and he joined the Green Party, which at least has more credibility and is more well-known. But still, he's going to run into all the same institutional problems that you're going to run into anytime you're running as a third-party candidate.
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to say that I'm actually not opposed to the idea of Dr. Cornel West running as a Democrat. There have been a couple people that have posited the idea. I think there was a Jacobin article written saying that Cornel should run as a Democrat, take advantage of the primary. And some people were like dunking on that article and its author. I thought that that article was perfectly reasonable. I understand why Cornel West doesn't want to run in the Democratic Party primary, but ultimately it's not something that I think would necessarily make his campaign any less viable. For sure, if anything, it would only make it more viable and would only give him more attention in the media, more access to mainstream media spaces in which he can, deliver his message and kind of have a megaphone to speak to the American people. But that being said, he decided to run as a Green Party candidate, not in the Democratic primary. So I think that's kind of where we have to analyze the situation from. And as far as the Democratic primary goes, there actually is a candidate that Zach and I are supporting in that primary as well. We're both huge fans of Marianne Williamson and what she's bringing to the conversation. I think in many ways her candidacy comes close to embodying the essence of the progressive movement that Bernie Sanders started and the progressive socialist message that he kind of became so successful because of, right? And honestly, one of the most depressing things for me to watch happen as a progressive political commentator has been the dissipation of energy around policies like Medicare for All in the wake of the Bernie Sanders campaign ending in 2020. Bernie Sanders proved to us that via electoralism, I think even in the form of a long shot campaign, you really can move the ball forward. You can normalize progressive policies like socialized healthcare and massively increase public support and enthusiasm for said proposals, just like Bernie Sanders did before he even really had a chance of winning, right? I think it's hard to get people really excited about progressive activism, specifically when it relates to kind of depressing subject matters like climate change, for example. But I think it's a lot easier to get people excited about and paying attention to a presidential campaign. I've always said that progressive presidential campaign is like a rising tide that lifts the boats of progressive activism, just like we saw with Bernie. All these activist movements like for healthcare, et cetera, they got a big, huge help, like a big lift thanks to the enthusiasm that Bernie generated for those causes and those movements. And that's why I think it's really important that the left continues to engage in electoralism in presidential elections, and that our ideas have a marked presence in the debate surrounding.
Okay, somebody just sent me a link. Cornel West owes IRS more than $500,000 in taxes. A new report found that the Green Party candidate hasn't been paying his taxes. Presidential candidate Cornel West, who spent most of his career advocating for higher tax on the wealthy, owes the IRS more than $1 million in unpaid taxes. Throughout his decades in the public eye, West, who is an academic at elite institutions and a best-selling author, has blasted the concentration of wealth at the top of U.S. society. Since announcing his run for president, first on the People's Party ticket and currently on the Green Parties, he has argued that taxes on the wealthiest Americans need to be much higher and higher. But West hasn't been putting his money where his mouth is, literally. An investigation by the Daily Beast published Thursday found that West owes more than $543,778.78 in unpaid taxes. The Beast cited tax filing in Mercer County, New Jersey, where West owes a house in the town of Princeton, and in Los Angeles, where West's personal attorney is. This isn't an issue. I mean, like, if he pays his taxes, and I probably wouldn't care too much at the end of the day, but this is just like leaving yourself up for like tons of political cannon fodder, especially if you're advocating for aggressive taxation. Anyway, where were we?
the presidential election, which again is when most people kind of start tuning in and actually start paying attention to politics. That's why Zach and I have been so enthusiastic and supportive of Marianne Williamson, who I do think comes close to embodying that essence that Bernie Sanders represented. Like I said, that progressive message. Her platform is very similar to his, and in some ways even better. But despite the fact that Marianne, as well as RFK Jr.,
Cornel West shows he hasn't been paying his fair share to help his community.
Look, it's not a good look. I mean, not paying your taxes is not a good look. I mean, that's the type of stuff people like criticize Trump for all the time. It's not good when he does it either. I assume he'll just pay his taxes though, and then hopefully it will be resolved. But again, you're just like you're opening yourself up to easy attacks with basic mistakes like that. Thank you, Juan, for the tier 3 sub. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Who I'm not a fan of, despite the fact that they're polling at 10% and 20% respectively. The DNC is completely refusing to sanction debates, in essence, refusing to sanction a primary at all. And meanwhile, they're talking about what a threat to democracy the Republicans represent. They're not even entertaining the idea of democracy when it comes to their own party electorate. I think that's pretty crazy. And I
do think that the Democrats not really hosting a party primary because Biden already won. And to be clear, he'd almost certainly probably win in a party primary. I know people point towards like polling data, but all the things that they say to try to remove, to say that Biden would not be the winner of a primary if it was fair, all things fair and equal, they were all true when he ran for office 4 years ago. And Democrats picked him because they thought it was the safest bet against Trump. Then he beat Trump. I think there's a decent chance, definitely with the vast majority of the party behind him, that it would probably still go the same way. But I don't think in principle that it should be basically just a rubber stamping of him being renominated. I don't like that. There should be a way that if a president isn't doing a good enough job, and I don't think Biden has done such a bad enough job that it requires like a massive movement to unseat him, but that possibility needs to be on the table.
That it leaves us no choice but to engage in the presidential electoral process via the only other means that's left to us, which is to enter the general election as a third-party candidate to try to get on the debate stage that way, because the issues that we're fighting for as progressives are simply too pressing for us to take 4 years off and stand idly by as they coronate Joe Biden again, who's a feeble personification of establishment politics, who, despite being slightly better than some of his more neoliberal counterparts in the Democratic Party, still completely fails to meet the moment on the front of climate change, income inequality, ballooning police budgets, the military budget, and more. Tens of thousands of Americans continue to die every year under Joe Biden's watch due to lack of health insurance. And despite the fact that Biden promised to deliver a public option for the people while he was campaigning, he hasn't mentioned it since getting elected. Without Cornel West as a left flank candidate representing a thorn in the side of Joe Biden, who will call him out and hold him accountable for his failures, Vaush? Who will make the moral case against the
probably primarily somebody within the Democratic primary process, because all Joe Biden has to say in response to Cornel West is he's not a Democratic Party candidate, he's a Green Party candidate, and he's not going to win because he's third party. Very cute. And then that'd be it. Because no one's going to take it seriously because it's third party. Just like no one really took Gary Johnson seriously. Just like nobody took, what was the Green Party candidate? Jim Stein seriously. Jill Stein seriously.
Neoliberalism that he represents. Because if it's not Cornel West, the only other candidate is potentially going to be Joe Manchin, who's not Donald Trump, if he decides to get in the race as an independent candidate.
That's not going to happen. I don't know. I think Larry Hogan's more likely than Donald Trump, and than Joe Manchin, and I don't think Larry Hogan's very likely either.
Or a no labels candidate, then that will represent the Overton window shrinking even more, and less debate, less attention for actual leftist causes that all three of us care about. Who will keep the momentum for policies like a Green New Deal, reparations, Medicare for all, and others alive while Joe Biden and Donald Trump continue to shrink the Overton window? And that's just the question that I most wanted to ask you, Vaush.
Well, there's a lot to get at there, but unfortunately, the answer is, if it's not within the Democratic primary, the answer is you don't get to. That's it. Nothing we do can come at the potential risk of empowering the fascists. Anti-fascism is the #1 ideological priority of everyone who isn't a fascist. It's as simple as that. It's not fair. I'm publicly critical of the Democrats for being so opposed to internal democracy. I've mocked them for being worse about it than the Republicans, but that doesn't change the underlying math. If anything that is done to, as you say, hold the neoliberal accountable, and it won't meaningfully, of course. The Democrats don't care if they lose, and they certainly don't care if an edge case candidate like Cornell.
Wait, the Democrats don't care if they lose? Like Democrats don't care if they lose the election? Of course they care if they lose the election. Then they're not in power. What do you mean? What's that comment from Vaush mean?
West, who almost certainly, based on historical records, won't get 5%, but even if he did, wouldn't make a dent in Joe Biden's viability as a candidate.
If they didn't care who won and lost, they wouldn't spend all this money advertising their campaigns. And, you know, Donald Trump wouldn't have fought so hard to not be, you know, removed from office.
Unless it's to lose against Trump, which is the thing that we cannot allow to happen. If it's not,
they don't do anything when they lead, when they have power, Dylan. When you say they don't do anything, what you really mean is they don't do enough. And I agree that they don't do enough due to a whole host of factors, personal disinterest in going as far as I would want them to go, as well as party policy, lobbyists, circumstance, which a lot of people undercut at times. But when you say they do nothing, the infrastructure bill isn't nothing, right? That isn't nothing. Nominating people to Supreme Court isn't nothing, considering that nothing is what got us like 3 Republican Supreme Court nominees that overturned Roe v. Wade. Nothing, like investments in the rural broadband isn't nothing. Investments into the domestic chip manufacturing market isn't nothing. The support to Ukraine, obviously, in my opinion, isn't nothing. Allowing people on Medicaid to try to get coverage for dental and hearing, that isn't nothing, even though I still don't think it went far enough. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't say is insulin caps. Like, again, many of these programs or policies, in my opinion, it might not go far enough, but it's in the correct direction. Whereas in the other party wants to go in the exact opposite direction. So I do think they do something. I just think it's too milquetoast.
Not done in the Democrat primary, then that's just the end of it. We can't risk this. I don't think that.
Not to mention, we're back to, I think, what is it, 2.5% GDP increase or 2% GDP increase for this financial year, when people were expecting much less. People were predicting recessions. We're seeing that those recession predictions now get reeled back in. Not saying it's impossible, but they're getting reeled back in, saying, oh, it was a much softer landing than people expected. Like that. I believe that Biden's economic policy is better than Trump's economic policy. I believe that Biden's foreign policy is much better than Trump's foreign policy. Just compare Biden and Trump's drone war. Trump drastically escalated the drone war. Biden brought down drone strikes by 90 to 95%. Only doing drone strikes when collateral damage can be basically almost entirely wiped out. Almost entirely ruled out, or there's not really an option. That doesn't mean there aren't still drone attacks that kill civilians. The Afghanistan strike, I think, is an obvious example of that. But to compare it in size and scale to both Trump or even Biden, Obama, like, it is a massive improvement. It is much more reserved, even if it's still not to the extent that you would want. That is a real measurable impact. Again, nobody is saying he's the perfect candidate. He wouldn't be my first choice for president. In fact, he was my last choice for the primary. The only person I picked Biden over in the Democratic primary, I believe, was Bill de Blasio. Not Bill de Blasio. What was it? Bloomberg. It was Bloomberg.
Progressives are going to sleep for 4 years if Joe Biden wins again. There's plenty that we can do within that space. There's plenty progressives have done. Midterms showed that progressives won big, more than we expected, certainly, both in the sense that Republicans lost and the better Democrats won. We've seen wins in places like Chicago on local levels. I think that there's room for a lot of work that can be done. We just have to do it in ways that don't potentially give ammunition or power to our adversaries. I don't think we get another election if the GOP wins again. We don't really have room to mess up on that front.
I guess my follow-up to that, Vaush, would be, what is your end? And maybe you don't have one, but I think that that's kind of the gap here, right? Is I think that, per my mind, let's just, engage in a counterfactual. We, show up, everybody votes for Joe Biden, kind of per your argument that you laid out, Vaush, as a denouncement of fascism from the Republican Party in whatever form it takes, Vivek, DeSantis, Donald Trump, who cares, right? And then at that point, you have Joe Biden in his second term, continuing his policy directions as he was engaged with today. And then he passes away and we get Kamala Harris as the VP who takes over and is now the president. And then the next election cycle comes around and they say there's not going to be a primary. It will be Kamala Harris in a similar way as it is right now, where they just decide not to engage in debates. They say, we have our president. This is the first Black woman president. This is the person that we're going to go with. And then
Can I answer you preemptively? Because I know what you're getting at.
You're going to just say you'd vote for her, right?
It never ends. We suffer and then we die. If all you can do in an election is push the fascists back for 4 more years.
By the way, can we look something up quick? Actually, 2012 Democratic primary debate. This is 4 years ago. This isn't from the recent election. There is no 2012 Democratic primary debate, is there? Wait, is this? No, that's Mitt Romney. Okay. I don't think it is that uncommon for the incumbent not to be challenged in the primary process. I do want to say, because they're saying that the Democrats are worse on this, but does anybody remember the what was it? The 2020 Republican primary debate? There wasn't one. The 2020 Republican primary wasn't really a real thing. I think it was like Jim Webb that challenged him. So I don't know why the Democrats would be worse on this. I think both parties are bad at this.
You do so, that's a victory. If you have the opportunity in an election to do something more, or a primary candidate to put forward who might be able to do something more, then you do that. And I think we should do that. But ultimately, the fight doesn't end at the ballot box. There are plenty of extra legislative and extra electoral ways to get your political message across. But we have to understand what we are capable of doing within the purview of any given election. Right now, with Joe Biden at the helm, the only thing we can do in 2024 is give ourselves a little bit more time. And maybe that'll be the case in 2028,
Angry French Canadian has donated $5. The last incumbent primary challenge was Bush 41 in 1992.
Huh. Okay, so it's been over 20-something years. Well, there was like a primary challenge in 2020 in 2012. If you look it up, I was looking it up off screen right here. Barack Obama was challenged by John Wolfe Jr. John Wolfe Jr. Does anybody know John Wolfe Jr.? Well, the vote was kind of close. Obama got 6,158,000 votes. Wolf got 100,000. So it was a real nail biter. Very close. Very close. I like the electoral map they put here. It's just a completely blue America, all blue representing Obama. Oh, jeez. Very, very brutal.
Maybe that'll be the case for as long as I'm alive. But if the math pans out that way, that's all there is to do with it. Socialism has been a known concept for well over a century. There is no socialist country on earth today. We have to understand we're dealing with timetables that extend well beyond our lives. We can't get indignant and frustrated when we don't get what we want, because the truth is we'll never get what we want, and then we'll die. No socialist has ever gotten what they wanted. It's the ability to rationally assess the range of what is possible and to act within it. Something political radicals tend to be really bad at. Fascists are always getting themselves killed because they can't understand the nature of the threats they face. And socialists have a similar problem, an inability to understand the meaningful distinctions between fascism and liberalism being a key one. If we don't understand that, then we will also be killed. We need to understand that the venue for our engagement with the masses has to be done under a liberal democracy. You can't do it under fascism. We're not allowed to speak under fascism.
But apparently we're not able to do it under a liberal democracy, as you just laid out. You said that we're always
doing it right now.
But this hasn't been working, Vaush. We've been spiraling towards climate change. Even if you look at people who would agree with you, Vaush, and allege that we need to vote for Joe Biden and stave off the threat of fascism at the expense of everything else, our climate change future, our the state of the planet, all of those kinds of things. Which I'm not a single issue voter. I don't mean to come off that way. Although I do think that the climate change conundrum, if you want to put it mildly, is something that needs to be addressed. Immediately. And so to have this kind of line of thinking where it's like, no, all we can do is prioritize staving off the Republican Party, that just leads me to believe that we're all going to die from climate change. And I can't accept that outcome.
Well, we are, for one. But for two, the Republicans would be worse on the climate change issue, too. Trump doesn't believe climate change exists. At least he pretends not to believe it exists. Vivek has openly stated that climate change is happening and it's anthropogenic, but it's good. And Ron DeSantis has laughed as insurance agencies pull their plans and coverage from Florida due to increasing damage from extreme weather events. Oh, no. I'm not saying Biden's good on climate change. I'm just saying they're worse. Yet another reason.
Vaush, Biden has done more drilling, though, than Donald Trump. Under Biden's administration, gas drilling approvals outpaced Donald Trump's. According to the Washington Post, Biden is approving more oil and gas drilling permits on public lands than Donald Trump. I don't think it's fair to say that if climate change is your number one issue, then that's a reason why you have to just keep voting for the Democrats. When I think
okay, I'm sorry. Look, we could get into specifics of why these permits were approved, right? But let's just assume worst case scenario, it's quite literally just to line the oil and gas companies' profits. And doesn't have to do with, stabilizing the economy or any of that's not a good enough reason but putting all of that aside for a moment, to say that this is enough to say that, okay, we vote for a third party candidate then, or vote for a candidate that's going to have a better position on environmental protection. Maybe we'll do zero oil drilling, or is going to ban oil drilling, or is going to say, actually, we need to start restricting the sale of oil, or whatever it would be, whatever that position would be. They don't have a chance of winning. And so the thing should be pressuring Biden to have a better position, not doing Hail Marys that have no chance of success. So the only purpose of a third-party candidate or a primary challenge that I give any type of okay, this could have a positive impact in any way, is stuff that is meant to challenge Joe Biden early on in the primary process so that he takes a better position on these issues. That's the stuff I would respect. But the investments in clean energy that have been made in the Biden administration would not have been made during the Trump administration. There is a clear difference between these two candidates, and when it comes to a recognition that the issue in and of itself exists. And I think that's a significant enough difference that necessitates voting for Joe Biden in the general. In primary, it's a primary. Do whatever you want to do. Vote with your values. It's a primary. But in the general, the choice is clear, especially if you're a swing state. If you're in a swing state and your vote really matters.
Are you earnestly suggesting that on all the issues altogether, if we were to surmise the positions and policies associated with climate, that Biden has been worse than Donald Trump? He was more of a coal guy. I think you're focusing on one specific element of his presidential term. I think if you look at the whole picture, though, it's pretty clear.
True.
The Republican Party is far, far worse on climate issues than the Democrats.
I think that is fair.
Perfect.
I think that is fair to point out. However, I think the degree to which they are better is at times just appallingly unacceptable.
Right. And if I could get
a bunch of funding for green energy and subsidies to green energy, he believes climate change exists, which is a pretty important step in any kind of meaningful improvement, I'd say.
Yeah, but if you look at the actual trajectory of the rate that we've been destroying the planet, all of those steps are going to be inconsequential, right? So that's all kind of irrelevant. Like, he's taking menial.
Okay, here would be the question I would ask Zach and Gavin. This would be my interesting question to them. What could Biden do differently about climate that would not immediately, because some people might be like, stop all oil and gas drilling, stop all extraction of oil. Okay, that'll collapse the economy. So he can't do that, because then it would hand it over to Republicans who would just run on the fact that drill, baby, drill. That's our response. So what is it that Biden could do with his 50 to 51 seat majority and lack of House majority that could be substantial climate change investment, substantial climate change, like substantially working forward on climate change. I would want to hear that. The main thing I would expect would be the oil and gas drilling, maybe like approving less permits. I know that's one thing you could suggest, but I would be interested to hear the other things. Yeah, issuing a state of emergency. Yeah, there you go. Issuing a state of emergency. That's another thing you could ask, yes. Evil Black Magic. Thank you so much for the primer. I appreciate that.
Steps. He's not actually willing to do the hard work that it would take in order to, you know,
yeah. So we have two options, and one of them's worse. So we should go for the not worse one.
Well, I want to push back on that whole logic, Vaush, because I don't think that we necessarily just have to accept the status quo when it comes to the duopoly and their control over our options. You talk a lot about fascism and enabling fascism, but I think we would both agree that one of the big red flags of a fascist political party is a party that tries at all costs to stop any sort of democracy from happening, to stop people from engaging or choosing candidates that align with their values. And I don't think that describes any political institution. Okay, well, I think that element of the Democratic Party is absolutely fascist, the way that they refuse to sanction democracy, not when Joe Biden has a candidate with 1% in the polling. I understand why Biden wouldn't want to debate a candidate who was maybe polling at 1%, similar to how Bill Weld challenged Donald Trump. He never got above like 2% in the polling. So Donald Trump never debated Bill Weld. I don't think that was like some sort of anti-democratic fascist thing. I understand why Trump, the incumbent of his party, didn't want to debate Bill Weld. But the fact of the matter is that Marianne Williamson is at 10%, RFK is at 20%, Biden is refusing.
Yeah, but let's be for real about RFK. RFK is at 20% because his name is Kennedy, right? If anybody sat down and listened to him for a long enough period of time, you had any idea what you were talking about, that popularity would drop drastically. His own family doesn't even fucking like him. You've got family members coming out of him saying, dude's a crackpot, man. He's destroying the Kennedy family name. Don't let us destroy our dynasty, please. Marianne Williamson, okay, at least treats herself seriously as a candidate. RFK is a fucking joke. Let's be for real. So I mean, like, he could debate him, but I don't understand what the purpose would be, considering, again, the reason he's polling there is because his name's Kennedy.
To even basically acknowledge the fact that his challengers exist. They're not sanctioning a primary. They're in no way sanctioning democracy. And even if you want to say, okay, well,
I don't know if his conspiracies or his voice are worse. I don't know if we should go after his voice. I think that's probably a medical condition. I don't know if that's the best to go after.
This is an incumbent presidency. Usually the incumbent president doesn't have to go through a primary. Okay, this one's an exception. Well, let's go back to 2016. You want to talk about enabling fascism? The Democratic Party enabled the fascism of Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton did the Pied Piper strategy, elevated Donald Trump among the Republican candidates. Meanwhile, they fucked over and cheated Bernie Sanders, who was the actual people's candidate that could have defeated Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders could have staved off Donald Trump, and the DNC enabled the fascism of the Republican Party.
So we're laying on a lot here, and we're doing some misnomers. All right, I'm a Bernie supporter. I don't take that back. They enabled the fascism unintentionally, but the Democratic Party did not deliberately get Donald Trump to win by fronting Hillary Clinton. The Democrats are incompetent and in some points collaborationist, but not insofar as they're willing to cede elections to the right. And they don't have to be in.
I thought earlier he said they don't care if they win. I don't understand Vaush's position on that.
Internally democratic. They're a political party, not a government agency. They don't have to run a primary. I would prefer they did.
Deeply problematic, Vaush?
Oh, I agree. But it's
also, when Vaush says collaborationist, what does he mean by that? Does he mean like bipartisan legislation? Does he mean like rhetoric that says like, we got to live with Republicans, man? Like, what is he? I don't know what he means by collaborationist. I would like. Collaborationist to what extent? What is collaborationism? Because if we live in a democracy, right? Definitely if you're a Democrat in a state dominated by Republicans, to some extent, you're gonna have to collaborate with Republicans if you want to get anything done, unless you literally just want to be in the rows just going rah, 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 and that's all you want, the only political impact you want to have. Which, if that's the only political impact you want to have, start a podcast. Don't become a political figure, right? Don't become an elected official. Don't try to mess with the levers of power. So I would love some clarity on that.
It's not fascism. I don't want these terms. I don't want these terms conflated, because to be clear, if the Republican Party got what they wanted, they would kill you both.
Vaush, I'm not saying
no. I want to be really clear.
I understand that
because
and I agree.
Clear.
He means as in would collaborate with fascists. There are some corporate scumfucks in the Dems. So I don't know what you mean, like Democrats who would legitimately like collaborate with Nazi style fascists is what he means. He means collaboration as a European would understand it, i.e. someone who is willing to work with the Nazis for the sake of their local society. So is Vaush's position that we work with no Republicans ever on anything? It would, I don't understand his position, because if you're like Joe Manchin, or if you're any Democrat in Louisiana, how do you expect to get anything done without trying to get Republican approval? You just physically don't have the votes. And you have to do something between election days, right? You can't just wait until maybe one day demographics or, you know, you make based enough arguments that's going to convince everyone. You got to do something in that time period, you know? It can't just all be obstructionism. It has to all obstruction to Republican policy. You have to push back in some way, and that's going to require some compromise. If you wanted to do marijuana legalization, maybe you can't get marijuana legalization. Maybe you can get medical marijuana legalization. And maybe you can try to collaborate on something like that. Is it going to be difficult? Is it going to be near impossible? Maybe in many instances. But I mean, what else can you do? The only other thing you can do is basically act as an obstruction, as a road bump on the Republicans' path of attacking labor regulations or attacking environmental regulations, etc.
Wait, please. I didn't finish.
Sorry.
We're clear on the threat of climate change, right? I understand that the stakes involved. I just want it to be known that when I say, well, the Republican Party is fascist, whatever, I'm not just talking about like a temporary secession of rights. What I'm saying is, by my estimation, I feel I've made arguments that are fair and reasonable in this account. They would
screw medical legalization, get the whole thing. Okay, I think you're just losing money. I think you're not understanding I think chat might be completely misunderstanding what compromise means. If you are in Louisiana and you're one of the 2 Democrats in the entire state, right? How are you, and you can't achieve legalized cannabis? That's impossible. The Republicans are going to say that's dumbass. I like beating people for smoking joints. I like taking 60-year-old grandma smoking kush and throwing her in the fucking electric chair. Whatever their position is, they are not in favor of it. And so you, as a Democrat, want to do whatever you can. And so either you reduce the penalties for violating drug laws around cannabis in your state, or you try to find something that is possible, like the legalization of medical marijuana. That is what I was referring to. Because what else can, again, Democrats in Republican governed states do?
Shoot you.
Okay.
So we're dealing with a threat level that we don't get to play with. There's no gradient here. We don't get to put a toe in and decide, okay, well, we'll cede a bit of power, but if it means that Cornel West gets to throw a rock at Biden, God, I wish, on the debate stage, there are concessions that we can't make. And as long as we can agree that Biden is better than Trump, which I think is a easy argument to make, the question then is, okay, insofar as we accept Biden must win, what can we do for the progressive agenda? And I think that's a valid question. And there's plenty we can do there, even stuff that upsets the Democratic Party. I mean, there's lots of work to be done there.
I agree, Vaush, but I think you're like slightly missing my point. I just want to make it clear what I'm saying here. I think that, and I agree about the threat, the fascism that the Republicans represent. I also, and this might be a slightly an area of disagreement that we don't have to go down an entire road. I also think the Democrats represent a more milquetoast variety of fascism. That is fascism nonetheless, but I will grant you that the Republican Party represents.
What does fascism mean anymore? Hitler's fascist, Mussolini's fascist, and Dianne Feinstein's fascist, and Joe Biden's fascist, and The Democrats are fascist. The Republicans are also fascist. Everyone's fascist unless they're what, like a socialist or a communist. I mean, I don't know. I feel like people throw around that word too simply.
A more real, more scary form of fascism. And my problem with the duopoly is that every single election cycle, as you said, it leads to there being a 50% chance of a fascist being elected. You said that earlier in the conversation. We just have to deal with the system. And
yeah, but if let's say 10% of the people who would have voted for Joe Biden voted for Cornel West, there's a 100% chance that the fascist, their words, gets elected. We're talking about Donald Trump. I think using that word isn't that crazy. So I fail to see the point. Like this means we should push the Overton window in a certain direction. This is what we should be discussing. But I don't understand how pushing forward Cornel West, possibly at the expense of Joe Biden's general election chances, because he is running a third-party candidate, is necessarily going to help, progress the nation forward, or is necessarily going to help lower the chances of what he's calling a fascist from getting elected. If there's ever a chance that a fascist can get elected in any election, the main goal of anybody who doesn't like fascism should be to make sure that the other options win, no matter who they are.
And keep trying to stave off the fascists every time. Well, in 2016, more people voted for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump, and the fascist still became president. In 2020, more people voted for Joe Biden than Donald Trump, and Biden did become president, but now the fascist is back. Biden didn't, charge him with sedition or take care of the problem or anything. He's back. Now we have to come out.
Well, I mean, he's now being charged with trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election. He's also being charged. I think he might have 4 indictments by the time all this is done. I mean, it's kind of difficult for the president himself to personally lead a crusade against his main political opponent without it looking like a fucking witch hunt, huh? So I think him instead appointing special prosecutors and having other parties go through with this process depoliticizes it more in a way that I think is positive for not only the case but for the country.
And do it all over again. This is going to happen.
And we're going to, yes,
and
until we die. Yes.
And I reject that. And I think that dynamic, that duopoly is worth protesting. I think it is worth protesting, just like many other elements of our society, which seem to be just set in stone and unchangeable. I think it's worth protesting. Vaush, every other developed country.
Unchangeable. I don't think it's unchangeable. It cannot be. We cannot make attempts to change it in ways which allow for the fascists to win. I want it to change, but we can't attempt to change it in ways that cede ground to the fascists. That's my only condition.
Well, don't you think that it's ceding ground to the fascists more not to vote at all than it is to vote green? There's 40% of the country that doesn't vote at all. There's like 1% of the electorate that actually does decide to participate in democracy, that shows up to the polls and they cast their vote not for a fascist, but for someone to the left of even the Democrat. How is that person enabling fascism when 40% of the country doesn't even get out of the bed to go vote at all? How is that? How are these people?
Because a person who doesn't.
Wait. If he motivates 10% of the. Okay, if Cornel West was just motivating more people to come out and vote for him, and it just sent a signal, and it made the parties make note of it, be like, damn, it looks like basically an open socialist is doing quite well. Maybe the Overton window needs to move a certain way so things don't get too crazy, and then they can apply pressure. But we all know that's not just like if Cornel West was to have a legitimate like run that's picking up a ton of media attention and he's getting like double-digit polling, he's not just going to be pulling out of the Americans who don't vote. He's going to be pulling out of the Americans who also have voted in the past. And then that takes from Joe Biden. And Cornel West is not going to get more votes than Donald Trump or Joe Biden in this election. It's just not going to happen. He's not going to be president. So who is Cornel West more likely to take votes from? Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Joe Biden, the person who is more left-wing on the American political spectrum. Can that undermine Joe Biden's chances at winning? Possibly. That's why I think he should be in the Democrat primary as well. Pressure him while the stakes aren't as high as they could possibly be, and where that type of pressure could possibly end up with us catching strays.
A person who doesn't vote is unknowingly enabling fascism. A person who votes green is knowingly enabling fascism. You're right, though. But mathematically, they're the same thing. And I've got plenty of issues with people who don't vote too.
I think that if I could maybe like expand this a little bit, Vaush, because I am curious. I think that if we went down a litany of issues, political positions, right? Medicare for, let's just call it the Bernie Sanders slate, of modern policy prescriptions to make America a better place, right? I think down the line, you and I would probably agree with a lot of those issues. Am I correct in that?
I'm sure prescriptively we agree on almost every political issue.
Okay. So my question for you is, if you're unwilling to engage in a electoral pursuit, you say, I'm not saying we can never have any of these things. I'm just saying that I'm not willing to risk it, i.e. in opposition to Donald Trump, right? Or, whatever the Republican Party is offering, which will undoubtedly be a fascist. How do we get there, right? Because I personally believe that a lot, right? I believe that, hey, we have to, like, I actually voted for Hillary Clinton, right? Like, I was not fucking around with Donald.
Yo, he's not sexist. I guess Gavin hates women. But I mean, hopefully he'll evolve some more and no longer hate women. But good job, Zach. You don't hate women.
Trump, you know what I mean? Like, I've never been one of those people that was like, and neither has Gavin, one of those people that was like, oh, January 6th wasn't that bad, or like, this guy is not actually like a problem. Like, I think that, that's absolutely absurd and just like, wrong by every metric, right? Like, Donald Trump was fucking horrible as a president, but after seeing the amount of discourse around pushing Biden to the left, after seeing the amount of, oh, these are the things that we have to do in order to accomplish things outside of the electoral process. This is what we have to do. And that was what was lectured to everybody in 2020, right? We actually had Noam Chomsky on our show, and he fucking lectured us about it. You know what I mean? Everybody was making that.
Do you think there should be an age limit to run? Or medical screening? I think medical screening makes more sense. I think passing a medical screening to run for president is a perfectly reasonable condition.
I'm a fascist too.
Well, I mean, like, I think it would primarily be set on things like probably mental health and like mental and quality of like the person's, like, obviously you can't just ask like, does this person have good judgment, because people are going to question that differently. But if somebody's showing like obvious like signs of dementia, or somebody's absolutely dementia riddled, they should not be the president of the United States, and they should not be allowed to run for the United States. It just doesn't make any sense. You would think this wouldn't be an issue because no one would want to vote for somebody who's dementia riddled, but because people wait like their whole years, their whole lifetimes, like building up the political career to run for president. Some people are confused as to why there's so many old people in American politics, is because you have to really, really know the system to get so far in American politics, to the point where many of these people like Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell are, to when they can actually run for president and win. Remember, Joe Biden ran so many different times, and he learned from so many mistakes before he eventually actually became president. And for a lot of people, that's the political pathway they take. And so if you spend 50 years building up your political career until you can get into the highest office of the land with a certain level of experience, that means that maybe you can, I'm not going to say LBJ it, like you know how to move every single level of lever of power and you do it effectively, but to have a general idea of what you're doing once you go into the office and you're not like, completely inexperienced, you're going to be up there in age for a lot of the people with the most experience. You get what I'm saying? Like, the people who are the most experienced in politics are going to be the people who have been in the Capitol for 40, 50, 60 years. And those are the people who also, due to that experience, are going to know how to maneuver those levels of power while in the executive branch as well, much better than their contemporaries, have more ties, maybe can pull in more endorsements, possibly more resources. So I do think there is a bias for the people who have been in the Capitol for much longer, which is also true of like most clubs or most like organizations. So I don't think it's terribly surprising, but there needs to be a limit on it. Some people say term limits. I'm not really a huge fan of term limits. I think a medical screening is a much better idea.
Fucking lectured us about it. You know what I mean? Everybody
don't
was
worry, I'd
making
call
that
him
case.
a fascist too.
Well, there you go. You know what? He's certainly terse. I'll put it that way. But what I'm saying is that I am sympathetic to a lot of what you're sympathetic to. But how do we get there? Because I'm not willing to accept the outcome of we're just going to all die from climate change. Nobody's ever going to have health care. Rent is going to be continuously more and more unaffordable, as will things like
voting for Joe Biden. You don't need to accept those things. All you need to accept is the fact that there are two paths right now, and one path gets us closer to solving these issues, even if it's marginal, and the other path drags us much, much further away from those goals and will, in fact, go in the exact opposite direction that we need to go, as many of the people on the other path don't even acknowledge that those problems are real. And remember that Joe Biden did what he did and got done what he got done and failed where he did fail, like with the $15 minimum wage, with a basically 50-50 House and Senate majority. Obviously in the House, it wasn't 50-50 exactly, but very close to 50-50. So if he had different tools and we can enable his presidency with more political wiggle room, with a more powerful House majority, more powerful Senate majority, who knows what more could get done, so it wouldn't be marginal gains. Hell, I think that certain other people who were running for the Democratic nomination back in 2020 and didn't get it, if they were president right now, would have gotten less done than Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's 50 to 60 years of ties and experiences and knowing how the legislature maneuvers was why he was able to get so much done with infrastructure investment and certain things where there might be some bare minimum on the fringes overlap and actual bipartisan consensus you can find, or that you can get through budget reconciliation, actually. So, like, I'm just putting forward that it's not like you literally can do nothing. You can also empower the legislators and the administration that's in power right now, give them more wiggle room to act on these things. Because let's say you apply all the pressure in the world to Joe Biden to pass $15 minimum wage. If he doesn't have the votes, he can't fucking do it. He can't do it. And so it's not just a question of having somebody in the executive branch who believes everything that you believe. It's also a question of the circumstances being right, the stars being aligned, having the votes in the House and the Senate, and making sure that the Supreme Court isn't politicized and far right enough to undercut any movement you would want to make in favor of labor protections or the protections of a woman's bodily autonomy. And this isn't the only way you can, of course, push on these issues. I think large-scale unionization across the country and the union and strike wave we've seen is good news. And I think that needs to be encouraged more. I like John Fetterman's legislation that recently was proposed. I don't know if you guys saw it, but John Fetterman recently proposed legislation that would make it so that people who are on strike can get government food stamps, can apply for it, and get that support so they won't starve while they're on strike, which would really empower strikers and I think could heat up the waves of strike across the country. But you're not going to get that legislation through the House and the Senate without a stronger Democratic majority, because the Republicans are going to sink that left, right, and center, no matter what the Democrats think.
Food that's nutritious and, you know, grown organic.
Not to mention, if you have more wiggle room, then the Democratic blue dog dissenters are going to have less wiggle room to you know, finagle you to reduce the quality of the legislation you're pushing, or to make it more milquetoast.
You know, which our chat always calls me a yuppie for, but I do think everyone is entitled to things like that. How do we accomplish that in your estimation? You know, still voting for Joe Biden.
Well, I think that, well, we need people on our side, obviously. Right now, you know, it's about meeting people where they are. The average American right now, what do they care about? You say healthcare, they don't care. They don't care about healthcare. Inflation, they don't care about inflation. You know, they say they do. People talk about it when they're polled. But what actually motivates people to get up, to go outside, to get angry online? Overwhelmingly, it's not meaningful stuff that actually affects the quality of their lives. It's culture war stuff. I mean, it's unfortunate. I'm not saying inflation and healthcare aren't important.
I mean, if you look at like, I don't know. I mean, I used to believe this too, but when we look at how the 2022 election went and what people voted on and what people didn't vote on when it comes to things like Roe versus Wade, protection of democracy being a major issue motivating Democrat voters, which are both decent reasons to go out and vote, I feel like the culture war stuff takes a lot more of a backseat when we talk to independents, and I think generally a lot of the people that need to be won over. That isn't the case all around, but the recent polling that I've seen, for example, on trans issues, independents couldn't care less. They literally couldn't care less. They don't care at all. And it's just that type of Republican advertising and aggression on trans issues is just not connecting with them. They think it's too politicized.
important. They're critically important. But we can see this with climate change, right? Climate change, the greatest existential threat man has ever seen. And right now in England, if you go to, you're one of those just stop oil protesters, you go in front of a car for 2 seconds, every British person, they'll jump out of their car, they'll beat you to death right there. The cops will put their thumbs up. They want you dead, People are bad at estimating the positions that actually matter to them. And I think what most people, I shouldn't say most, but many liberals in America are most concerned with right now is the encroach of fascism. It's something I'm obviously pretty concerned with as well. I think the best way to affect change is to work on wedge issues and pivot points, assuage people when possible, and get them increasingly concerned with the issues we care about when given the opportunity. So this is why Biden got so many more votes than Hillary Clinton, in addition to the fact that Biden is much more likable than Hillary. It's because after one term of Donald Trump's presidency, people realize, oh, this isn't like Bush anymore. We can't just sit grumpy on the sidelines. There's like a threat, Towards the end of Trump's presidency, Attorney General Barr was threatening sedition charges to Black Lives Matter protesters. Could have rounded up millions of Americans, though realistically, he probably would have captured far fewer than that. It still would have been a threat to essentially everyone. This is a real problem. And now people are all worked up over it. And a lot of people will take anyone, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, anyone, over the alternative. So I say, work with it. Be God's strongest soldier for Joe Biden. Assuage those fears.
But that doesn't. Hold on. I don't want to cut you off. But
we're doing it for a good reason, because we're biding our time, and we're introducing our perspective on wedge issues when given the chance.
I think some people don't understand. Like, there's the most socialists in Congress right now, probably, that there's been ever. At least open, avowed socialists. People who call themselves democratic socialists. I mean, Bernie and his kind of like beliefs used to be seen as kind of like old crackpot beliefs, but it is beliefs of a new generation of Democrats and people joining the party. And if you see how the party is transforming on issues like Palestine, with the majority of Democrats now feeling more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than the Israeli cause. That's recent polling data from Pew Research. That doesn't mean I'm pulling something out of my ass. Now, these are real transformations that are happening. But to think that the socialists hold the power within the Democratic Party, or that we have like a gigantic coalition, socialists or social democrats, or I mean people, I guess Democratic Socialists, the DSA caucus, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the squad, they make up like 12 people, 15, 20 maybe. If you want to expand the the definition of like expanding the progressive, maybe we're getting like 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 people out of a Congress of like 450. We need to understand the leverage we have in order to know how to increase it and know where we can improve in the future. Anyway, let's keep going. Because I think sometimes some people think it's just a question of like, he could have just had 50 minimum wage if you just flipped the switch. It's never that simple.
Chance. See, that's why I think the progressives did so well back in 2020. This is the era of populism, right? It's not.
Well,
just
hold on though, Vaush. Hold on. You said introducing the ideas over time, but I mean, I'm not that old. I remember going from 2015, Barack Obama's president. I'm a junior in high school. Then AP Gov starts August, 2015. And all anybody's talking about is Bernie Sanders. And now the entire political discourse has changed to include like whether or not it's crazy to give everybody free healthcare, whether or not it's crazy to give everybody college tuition for free, at a public level. Everybody's talking about how is this.
These are all great reasons why Cornel West should have challenged Joe Biden in the Democratic Party nomination process.
Crazy or not, and then the entire public settled on the fact that no, it wasn't crazy, and you can still look, as I'm sure you have done, Fox News polling, which will show.
Well, I mean, it depends on like what type of because, for example, if we're talking about single payer healthcare where you don't have private providers, right, where you have a public provider and the private providers are not competing with the public provider, you're gonna get a different response. But the idea that every American should be covered by publicly subsidized healthcare, that is popular. That is very popular.
Show that if you ask people if healthcare is a human right, if everybody should be afforded healthcare,
these are popular ideas,
even if you ask them specifically about Medicare for all, it'll be above water 51%, right?
Yeah.
That happened immaculate. That was a seismic shift in, people's understanding, people's, the Overton window is like the popular way of phrasing it, I think, right? Is that it was shifted massively to the left, right? And so now people started to believe, oh, hey, maybe we can have these things that everyone else in the developed world has, that we ensured they had if it was a country that we destroyed after World War II.
I mean, here's another reason why Cornel West should have done the Democratic Party, even though, again, I disagree with him on Ukraine, disagree with him on other issues as well. Think like RFK is getting so much more media attention than Cornel West. And I think part of the reason is because he's challenging Joe Biden. And so people are painting it in that way. And I'd rather see the ideas challenging Joe Biden, like Marianne Williamson's doing. And this is why I do look upon her challenge to Joe Biden more favorably than I do look at Cornel West's. I'd rather them be seeing like a lot of proposals on universal health care, stuff like that, than like, vaccines are fake, they don't work. Ukraine, for every Ukrainian soldier that dies, for every Russian soldier that dies, 7 Ukrainian soldiers die, CIA coup, nonsense. I mean, Cornel West isn't perfect on that stuff either, but he's a lot better than RFK and be a much better primary opponent against Joe Biden. Not to mention, I think he's a better public speaker, hands down.
We made sure they had a nationalized health service, right? And you can document all over the world. France, Italy, South Korea, Japan. They all have a fucking far superior healthcare system than us.
Happened? When was this big shift in people's perspectives and what can and can't be done by the government?
I believe it. I mean, don't you believe when were people talking about any of those things? When was there rhetoric and groundswell? I mean, if you look at the membership of the DSA, it went through the fucking roof when that happened. I mean, and now you have things popping up across the country like tenants unions. You have, organizers, moving around. It was a seismic shift in the public consciousness. I feel like, I feel like it's that
back in 2016, right?
Right. And so what do we do to take that shift, right? Which I feel like happened overnight. You keep calling them like fringe wedge issues, but actually they have a lot of popular support, broad public support, even amongst people who would not be Democratic primary voters. So it's not a wedge issue. It's not a fringe issue. It's actually the popular issue. As you mentioned, we're in an era of populism, but yet we've denied, because of our corporate duopoly, anybody the opportunity to actually support a candidate that's going to institute those policies, which just, of course, encourages disenfranchisement.
That's exactly the thing, though. Bernie Sanders only did well back in 2016 because it was preceded with 8 years of Obama. Obama crushed McCain and did really well against Mitt Romney as well. Obama's era was one of complacency, but complacency has a positive side, which is when people get comfortable. When people get, did I say Mitt Romney, whatever. All white people the same. When people get complacent, when people get familiar with the Obama type status quo, smug liberal politics, right? People want more. The problem we're dealing with right now is that the Republican Party is such an existential threat that it's introduced an environment where any Democrat is so much better than the Republicans that we kind of cut down on the internal differences. The difference between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden is nothing compared to the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Honestly, I thought Vaush was just saying some bullshit here, but now that I think about it, Bernie Sanders came up after 2 terms of Obama. And if you talk to a lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters who are maybe, big Obama supporters as well, they'll say, we're supporting Bernie Sanders because we were disappointed on the deliverables, on what Obama said about hope and change. And we got some things, but, you didn't deliver on all that hope. You didn't deliver on all that change. So I do actually, now I'm sitting here and think about it. I do think Vaush actually has a point here.
They're massive. The gulf is huge. And so
but I think that was also like somewhat hypercharged by Obama's message being hope and change.
Apparent difference between candidates on the left shrinks. What we need to do is crush the Republicans. We need to assist in the Democrats' victory over them. The Republicans must have no chance of winning. They have to be irrelevant. They need to be made non-existent as a party. And in that environment, which is the environment we were in back in 2008.
This is a hard argument for for Vaush to make here. No difference between Joe Biden and Vaush. Because Joe Biden and the Democrats will talk about wanting a strong Republican Party. Now, how much they mean that in actuality, I think what they're saying is they need an opposition party. They need an opposition party. Nobody wants one party ruling everything all the time, right? There should be there needs to be an opposition party. But whatever that party is needs to take a completely different shape than what the Republican Party is currently.
2012, where Obama was crushing it, was doing well on basically every level up until the very end. In that environment, people become discontented because now that they're no longer placated with the threat of Republican intervention, they can be sold a better narrative. And that's why Bernie Sanders hit the way he did. If Bernie Sanders had showed up in 2020 for the first time, I think it would have been like Marianne right now. I think he would have just shown up, little voice, gone down, not really mattered. You know, I think he just would have been another person up on that stage.
Wait, Vaush, just to understand, I feel like you kind of contradicted yourself because earlier you said we're always going to have to deal with the Republicans in every election cycle, and it's always going to be something that until we die, we're going to have to resist and fight back against. But now you just said we have to basically defeat them once and for all or something?
Well, I don't think fascism is literally an eternal threat, but I think that we need to always ward off against the right wing, however it may represent itself. And I think,
okay, there's not going to be a future where there's no right wing in America. The Overton window is going to keep, what was right wing now, like if you go back 200 years, is not going to be considered right wing then, right? Like whatever is considered right wing now is going to change, and that Overton window is going to shift, and the political debate's going to shift with it. Right? So there's always going to be some form of opposition. It's just the MAGA style, and I think that the Lindsey Graham style, Mitch McConnell style type of Republicans, all these different types of Republicans, even if the Mitch McConnell type is less insidious and less dangerous to democracy on a fundamental basis, these styles of Republicans are hopefully going to fade with time as they run into more and more of the Overton shifting and political catastrophe after political catastrophe. Eventually, if the Republicans just keep losing and keep face planting, they're gonna have to, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Even though that's kind of what the Turkish opposition did, running against Erdogan, running Kılıçdaroğlu again.
That insofar as fascism exists in this country through the GOP, it can be pushed down, not done away with entirely, of course, but if it seems like less of a threat, then yeah, I think there's more room for discourse on the left, right? Because then the average voter, the average liberal, doesn't see every election as an existential war for the safety of this country and its democracy, but rather as, there's a little bit more wiggle room. The main reason people voted for Biden in 2020 was because he was the most electable candidate, not because they liked him or his policies or any other reason actually associated with him, but because he was the most electable, which
if you look at the Democratic primary polling or questions, this is 100% true, what Vaush is saying right now. That's why he dominated in the Democrat primary. It wasn't even because all of his policies were most loved or whatever. It was because they thought that he was the best at beating Donald Trump.
Indicates to me that they were concerned first and foremost with beating a Republican, not with finding a Democrat candidate they liked. I think we need to focus on the first priority, beating fascists first, and then we get the luxury of bantying about our ideas in an environment where they're taken over any victory against fascists.
I understand what you're saying, but I think the problem I have with that is I feel like that's what we've been doing for all of modern American history, right? And as long as we have a duopoly, that means that the pendulum's going to keep swinging back and forth. Even if we defeat fascism for now, in 4 years, we're going to be in a whole different political climate. And the nature of a duopoly election is that the pendulum swings back. Even after 8 years of Democratic dominance under Obama, like you mentioned, pendulum still swung back to Donald Trump. Sometimes people just get bored of who's in power and think maybe this other team will help me out more. We saw the same thing happen in Brazil when Lula, who was president for 14 years or something and did such a great job as president, but people that had grown up under Lula and didn't really know anything else, they were like, hell, we'll vote for this other guy, Bolsonaro.
It's not that simple. Maybe not, less with Lula himself. There's other problems with his party. It was never really problems with Lula himself. It was always the problems with people around Lula. I don't know a ton about Brazilian politics, so I feel a little uninformed to be commenting on this, but it's not that simple.
Bolsonaro, just because he's different. We don't know what it's like to not live under Lula, so let's try out Bolsonaro.
Changed. I mean, we got the Civil Rights Act. The country's clearly shifted leftward over time, even if things swing between the two parties, an inevitable consequence of a first past the voting system.
That's what I'm saying is worth protesting, Vaush. This idea that we have to have only two choices, which aren't even real choices, by the way, because as I said, the DNC massively put their fingers on the scale and you know, basically cheated Bernie Sanders out of the 2016 election when he actually could have beat Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump would have really been successful under against any other candidate, you know, other than Hillary, who was so uniquely easy for him to defeat. And who gave us Hillary? The DNC gave us Hillary, and Trump, for that matter. Like I said, they did the Pied Piper strategy with whether or not it was intentionally a way to make Trump president. Obviously not, but it still kind of enabled him to a very large degree. And I
do away with first past the post voting. I agree. We're not going to do that under fascism, though.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that then, Vaush, because I'm sympathetic to the argument. We had this conversation with Kyle Kulinski. I think you reacted to it, and I think that he made a version of this argument that I'm definitely I understand, right? And I appreciate the fact that Kyle, you know, he says, I would love to vote for Cornel West. I would love to vote for the Green Party as I have in the past. I just don't think it's realistic because of the fact that we have first past the post voting. We don't have ranked choice voting yet. So until we have something like ranked choice voting, I don't really think it's like viable to support third party candidates. I understand that logic and I get that argument. But that being said, I think that the third party movement is all about resisting the duopoly aggressively, not asking for their permission to vote for a candidate who's not just one of two evils, right? So just waiting around until we have ranked choice voting, I don't think that's a good idea either, because we can't just wait for permission, right? We can't just wait until...
No, we can, and we have to. It's not mathematically possible for a third party to outperform one of the two major parties.
It has happened, though, in elections.
You have to go back like a long time.
I mean, in the late 90s, Jesse Ventura won the governorship of Minnesota.
A local election in national politics is going to be very, very different. Locally, write-in candidates can win. I know write-in candidates that have won elections locally, like for delegate and representatives and city council. But the idea of running a national write-in campaign for president sounds idiotic on its face. And it's because locally, it's going to be a lot easier for you to personally go to everyone's door and knock and be like, hello, my name is so-and-so, and I'm running a write-in campaign because the person in there is kind of corrupt, But nationally, that's just not practical. And so third parties can be maybe more possible on a local level, but coordinating that kind of, I mean, you're going to need so much more party infrastructure in place, because a lot of it's going to depend on how strong that local party is in that state. That third party is in that state. So we're going to have the third party be able to be powerful in all the states across all the countries with ballot access in all the areas, being able to get on the debate stage by hitting the 15 to 20% polling margin that's going to be necessary to get on the debate stage, get that national spotlight. It's just not feasible. It's just not feasible. Again, but all of these hurdles and burdens that they would have confronted could have been easily avoided if Cornel West challenged Joe Biden in the Democratic primary process like Marianne Williamson did.
Or local elections, to be sure, but states don't always have the same systems for allocating votes. We obviously have the Electoral College for the federal government. The amount of money that's spent between the two parties on advertising themselves and legitimizing themselves, it's not something that a third party can compete with. And even if they did so far as to oust their ideologically, adjacent party, all they would do is throw the election to the other side. We do need something other than first past the post voting, or there's no viability for third party candidates. It's just mathematically not possible. We know how these models trend. It's just not viable. It's essentially a waste of a vote.
Well, Vaush, if that's the case, and I kind of agree to some extent, and people actually become worried enough about the spoiler effect that they institute ranked choice voting, which, if anyone's not familiar, takes care of the spoiler effect. Under ranked choice voting, you could vote number 1, Cornel West, number 2, Joe Biden, and then if Cornel West doesn't get enough votes, then your vote carries over and it goes to Joe Biden, right? That's the system we'd all like to live in, because then you can vote your conscience without having to worry about the spoiler effect. But I think that there's not going to be much of a public appetite for ranked choice voting. No one's even really going to care about it unless there is a bold and viable third-party movement in the first place, right? It's kind of like the chicken and the egg. No one's going to care about ranked choice voting until they actually have third-party candidates that they're excited about and want to see elected. And if we can get Cornel West to 5%, mostly through a strategy of people who live in state.
Didn't Gary Johnson get 6% in 2016? What did Gary? Let me look at 2016 election results. Donald Trump, Hillary got more votes, but she lost. I don't even see them. I don't even what percentage did Gary Johnson get? Gary Johnson. I want to see one that includes all of it. 3.3% of the vote, coming in third. Got you. Okay, no, it did not hit 5%.
Safe states like Alabama, which is definitely going to go red, or California, which is definitely going to go blue. If we can get to a strategy where those people, at least enough of them, vote for Dr. West and get him to 5%, well, that will be a real game changer, in my opinion. It would qualify the Green Party for recognition as an official national party and for federal funding in the next presidential race. That would increase the public awareness of the Green Party and of the concept of non-duopoly options. In my opinion, just
if we wanted to have multiple parties in the United States, ranked choice voting would be the way to go. And the way he's describing it right now is Cornel West specifically goes to states where it's safe. He does not campaign in states seriously which could affect Joe Biden and undercut his chances of winning. And he goes to states like, I don't know, Tennessee, Mississippi, or states that there's no chance he's going to lose. Maybe California, you know? I think this would be the safest way to do what he's talking about.
To such an extent that it would increase the movement for ranked choice voting. It would make more people interested in making ranked choice voting a reality, because without that, people are just going to forever believe that third-party candidates are a waste of their vote, that it's just a protest vote, that it's unserious, unviable. Right, and that's why we need ranked choice voting. And until people actually have an appetite and want third-party candidates as options and to be able to succeed, no one's going to be doing activism on behalf of ranked choice voting, if we're
going to chicken and the egg this argument, I think we should start at the point that doesn't cede votes over to the fascists. Beginning with ranked choice voting and then building up legitimate third-party movements is the best shot that we have for making that work. But tossing 5% of the vote to Cornel West,
they do have a good point, though, that how are you going to make a political environment that will actually institute ranked choice voting without having viable third-party options or third-party candidates, without having a movement behind it that's requesting it? It's not going to just like fall out of thin air, right? The counter from Vaush, I think, would be that now is not the time and or place to do that, especially if we're talking about doing something that could actually undercut Joe Biden's chances of winning. So that's why I think Gavin was smart to specifically talk about here, doing it in states where Joe Biden doesn't have a chance of winning it, or there's no chance Joe Biden could lose it, i.e. Tennessee, California, not Florida, even though Florida is probably almost certainly going to go to Republican, not Pennsylvania, not Ohio, not Michigan, not Minnesota, etc.
Making it harder for Joe Biden to win against Donald Trump.
How does people showing up to vote in Alabama for Green Party candidate hurt the chances of Joe?
See, now that the stipulation has been added, there's not much Vaush can really say in response to this. I'd really like to hear it from Vaush, but I think in this specific circumstance, if this is the approach that Cornel West is taking, which, by the way, we don't know that that's the approach Cornel West is taking. This is, I think, something they're suggesting. Then this shouldn't do too much damage to Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, do you think Joe Biden has a feasible chance of winning a state like Alabama with all of its gerrymandering and fucking, crazy people?
Well, first of all, voting doesn't actually work that way. When public figures such as yourself and I say, hey, vote for this third-party candidate, but only in this slim case in these states, what you're actually saying is vote for the candidate. I've just seen this before in 2016 and 2020, and I don't. There's never, no matter how disciplined you are when you say it, people vote for who they think they should vote for, and they're not going to let pragmatism come in the way of that. It's just a consistent problem. Also, I want Alabama to go blue. Cali's not solid blue, right? Like, there's a lot of red in Cali, and
but I mean, I want these states to go blue as well, but if there's not a viable investment and or strategy to make them go blue, then like what are the odds?
You know, Georgia went
again. Again, I want to do everything within my power to move the Democrat Party further socially and economically, in the favor of pro-union, pro-labor, in favor of socialized medicine. I believe that's the most direct way I can have the effect, have a direct effect on the lives of everyday people. Right? I think the third party stuff is too much in the air for me to know that these contributions are going to have some effect on people who actually have power. But the way that they're proposing this, they're proposing it in the least harmful to Joe Biden's chances of beating Donald Trump possible. They're framing it in a very good way here.
People didn't expect that. Maybe some people would have written Georgia off as red. I certainly think I might have, you know. Florida used to be a swing state. Now it's red. Maybe it could go blue again. The problem is if you give up as soon as the state turns red, then you preclude the possibility of moving it back into being a swing state. And if you give up when the state's already blue, then you give the Republicans the opportunity to pull it into a swing state.
I don't think it's giving up though to say, hey, because of the fact that my vote is essentially meaningless if I live in New York or Alabama.
No, that's giving you. That's the giving up. You just said the giving up.
Giving up perhaps on the Democrats, but not in general. I think it's saying, okay, because of the fact that in my assessment, it's a waste of my vote, no matter who I vote for in Alabama, might as well take that opportunity to try to build something new on this ripe, fertile ground, right? I don't think that's really giving up. And also another related
you're ceding ground to the Reds.
I mean, I think that in a state like Alabama, as Zach said, there's not really a feasible chance that Joe Biden has of winning the state, which is another reason to raise awareness about how pointless the Electoral College is. I think it's ridiculous. If
Texas?
Well, Texas, I think, is close enough to being a swing state at this point that you could make the calculus that you want. I'm not in the business personally of telling people necessarily who to vote for or voter shaming them.
Wait, why not? It's a moral judgment. We should make prescriptive statements.
Because Vaush, I think it depends on which state you live in. I think that for everyone in my audience, they probably have slightly different experiences and slightly different priorities that might lead them to wanting to vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump, but also people that would want to vote for Cornel West and have no interest in voting for Joe Biden. Maybe them or people they know have been affected by the crime bill that Joe Biden wrote. Maybe people they know have been affected.
No. Fuck their experiences. Fuck my audience's experiences. Fuck all of them. If there's a moral argument to be made, then their opinions don't matter. You say what you think is right. In Texas, is it Joe Biden or Cornel West? I don't get into this. So my interest in electoralism isn't get out there and vitalize the system. As far as I'm concerned, there are right and wrong answers, and I want people to make the right ones. And I'll be as forceful about that with my audience or others as I feel is necessary. A lot's on the line here. I just worry that while we're all starry-eyed looking up at the sky, hoping that maybe with this esoteric strategy we can get Cornel West to somehow get more votes than the prior third-party candidates have, and that would get him the $15 million or so in federal funding that he could then use to get, let's be real, not that much more of a percent of the vote. Debate against Joe Biden, which would be a senile old man throwing rocks fest, accomplish nothing. Joe Biden maybe wins, maybe loses, but it's harder for him now against Donald Trump. And all of this is at the risk. I mean, we're flirting with the worst possible.
Do I think Vaush is doing good at cutting through? I'm sorry, I'm messaging people about voiceover for projects that I'm working on right now. I haven't been listening terribly closely. I can go back if there was anything in the last 30 seconds that he said that was very informative or really a really good response. But it does sound a little bit like looping. I feel like we're kind of looping at this point.
Possible outcome. That's what I'm worried about. It would be a lot easier to make these decisions and take these risks in an environment where loss does not come at mortal expense. We have to be careful.
But then it's a zero-sum game, Vaush, which is what I've been trying to, and I don't want to steer the conversation backwards.
Votes are votes.
What I wanted to, kind of get your perspective on here is that you made the point that, you would prioritize ranked choice voting as a potential solution, and calling your Congress people, whatever, getting them, people motivated on board with passing ranked choice voting before you would ever consider, supporting a third-party operation, which is fine. I just think that makes it impossible, because not only are you going to come up against absolute like crazy opposition from basically every corporate source ever, the Republicans, but also you're going to have to start battling the Democrats, right? And if you always fold and you always come back and give the Democrats what they want, that they will never institute ranked choice voting, because they know it will be their death certificate, right? The Democrats want a rigged game between, they want to be the only game in town, right? They want to, it's like Vegas. It's all divvied up between the same couple of fucking casino owners, right? Even though they open up a bunch of different fucking, casinos on the strip, hotels on the strip, it's all the same like fucking five guys that run the show, right? And that's exactly how they like it. And if anybody else comes onto the block, they will fucking collectively, like piranhas, run that guy out of town. That's how the Democrats like it. Because as you mentioned, I believe on this exact stream. Has the game changed at all? Well, I know you brought up the civil rights movement, and obviously that's a tremendous accomplishment that was brought after fucking decades of horrendous struggle.
Shout out to LBJ, by the way.
By some of the greatest Americans that we've ever seen. And no, I would never try and downplay that, but I would also introduce to you the fact that a lot of fucked up shit happened after the civil rights movement, right? We've been on a downward slide where not a lot of great things have happened. One, we lost Roe versus Wade comes to mind pretty quickly. It doesn't look like Obergefell is going to be fucking like protected. In the future, if the Supreme Court keeps going the way that it's going, they'll tear every fucking protection apart.
Man, I really wish we could have had 3 Democrat Supreme Court appointments in 2016. What could we have changed or what happened in 2016? I forget what happened in 2016. If somebody remind me, that'd be really good. Because it feels like something happened in 2016 that really busted up the future for the Supreme Court. Oh, man. I've been thinking about this for a bit. We need to change. There has to be some change in how Supreme Court nominees are nominated, or the culture around the Supreme Court. I hear about the depolitization of the Supreme Court, and I don't think that it's completely possible, but I do wish that it wasn't as partisan, as openly partisan as it is. I think that's bad. I think it's really bad. And something has to be done to change that. But I'm not a legal expert or could think of a better nomination process than what is already available. If anyone has any good materials on that, I appreciate emailing it to DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com.
Loving.
I feel like that's a shit take, Dylan. You don't think it's a shit take to say that having an incredibly partisan judicial system, where the legal decisions are basically determined by like what party could nominate a lawyer at what time and not on the merits of the legal case? You don't think that could be, a negative thing? I think the court is inherently political. If the court talks political issue, it's going to be political to some extent. But if it becomes, we're going to pick the candidate that rules in favor of the things that we as Democrats agree with, and the Republicans are going to be like, we're going to nominate the person who disagrees with whatever we agree with, and that's the nomination process, that's I don't know. That's pretty, I don't think that's stable. I don't think that's good. I think it should be decided based on legal acumen. The question is, how do you develop a system that could determine if somebody has the political acumen for the job and nominate them outside of the very divisive partisanship that's in the United States today? I don't have the answer to that question. But how the Supreme Court is done right now, I don't think anybody would say is fantastic.
They got they got one, but that's it. That's what I'm saying, right? Like, they got one term. Trump appointed 3 judges, and that's all it took for them to tear apart a whole.
Pack the court doesn't address any of the issues that I just listed. In fact, packing the court would be, I feel like, the pinnacle of the exact problem I'm talking about right now. Here's a question: we pack the court right now. Reverse Roe v. Wade. Donald Trump wins. He just packs the court again. What would change it from, like, they're just going back and forth? Like, oh, the court's made a decision we didn't like, so we're just going to pack the court. Imagine that in the hands of somebody like Donald Trump. I don't like that.
A whole bunch of civil rights oriented
But
you know.
in addition, I just took that in one direction. We could talk about the other things that have happened far before Donald Trump did that. We could talk about NAFTA and how, as a result of Bill Clinton and the Democrats in the 80s trying to appease whatever fucking craziness of the right wingers at the time, the like new Democrat, oh, it's the economy, stupid kind of fucking bullshit that was going on at the time. It led us to fucking offshoring all kinds of jobs, right? What was Obama up to? He was offshoring all kinds of fucking jobs, and he was also bailing out the bankers. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but things have gotten on the whole better over the past 100 years, in spite of the fact that we've been juggled in a corporate duopoly. I don't think that the existence of a corporate duopoly means that we're incapable of making positive changes. I think lots of positive change can be made from within it. And I also think that, let's be realistic here, your shot at changing all this has a 0% chance at working. The overwhelming might of global capitalism stopped by people in Alabama voting for Cornel West rather than, no. See, that's the thing here. What you're talking about fundamentally is a corporate superstructure that can only be overthrown through great violence, or at the very least civic uphaul. We're not talking about something that Cornel West can do. Bernie Sanders couldn't do it. None of us can, not individually and not as a group. We're talking about revolutionary stuff. So as long as we're talking about a problem that can't be solved.
I feel like we're kind of looping a little bit, and now we're getting to like the revolutionary talk, and I don't know how interested I am in that. We've been watching this for over an hour. I think I'm gonna tap out here. I think Gavin and Zach, in their proposal of the specific strategy that they mentioned about Cornel West targeting states where the Democrats and Republicans are probably solidly going to take it anyway, that there's not really going to be large-scale investment from the Democratic Party to try to flip these states, right? I think they offered probably the least harmful way that somebody could do a third-party nomination process while not compromising Joe Biden's ability to win. Now, I do think that running a third-party candidate, period, that could at all eat into Joe Biden's votes, because let's say that you're going to vote for Cornel West because you heard his message over Joe Biden in Florida, even if he didn't knock on your door. That could still have a negative effect on the campaign, but I think this is the least harmful. And if you care about trying to bring about a ranked choice voting system, which I haven't really heard him talk about ranked choice voting that much. Maybe it's just because I haven't listened to the right appearances. I've heard him bullshitting about Ukraine a lot more and saying nonsense about it, but whatever. I think the way they offered is the best system, but I also think that Vaush made a really good case as well. I think Vaush made a very good case, and I do agree with Vaush's position more. Because again, I think that you just avoid the speed bumps that are in place for third parties by just joining the Democratic Party, creating a caucus within that party, and creating a movement within that party that could drag it in one direction. I think it's a much more direct way to have an impact, in a way that you can actually have a dialogue about the legislation that is being pushed through office, and not just a cultural effect or a pressure effect from the outside where you have no input on the legislation that's being proposed. Anyway, decent enough debate. Bop, bop.